Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and today we're going to take a closer look at loose graded, mainly vintage Star Wars figures. At the end, I've got some really nice Polish bootlegs. One of them actually AFA graded, but I questioned the label on it. And then we've got some Polish deluxe figures, which are by far the rarest of the vintage Polish bootlegs that sold at auction. So we got to go through those. As always, thanks to my Patreon supporters. Patreon.com/actionfiguregrader is where you can go to sign up to get 24 hours early access to all my videos, as well as my eBay Buy It Now alerts. Thanks to those who support the channel. Really appreciate that. All right, let's take a look. The first one is a CAS 85 Luke Farm Boy. This one had the L on the saber hilt, and I don't know if it's just the lighting or what, but that saber looks awfully white to me. It's probably just the flash from the photos. They used the CAS photos, but that saber looks extremely white, even in the photos from the buyer. So I don't know what's going on with that saber. It could just be degraded over time. I don't know. Very nice figure overall, though. That one sold for $210.50. Pretty good deal on a CAS 85. Here is an FX7, and this seller, LAX Cards Vintage, had a number of loose graded auctions that I'm going to cover today, and we'll kind of skip around. But this FX7 was an 85 plus with the orange eye archival case. There's also obviously a red eye for that Hong Kong FX7, and that one sold for $165.50, which you don't really see 85 pluses and 90s very often for the FX7, just because of all the weird wonky arms that can pop off and things like that. And that little extender arm that he used to unplug, I don't know if that was 21B or the FX7 that unplugged Luke from the Bacta tank, but that little arm usually does get a lot of wear. The white paint really comes off of that one. So very tough to find in an 85 plus or a 90, and that one did sell for $165.50. Here was an interesting one down in Australia. This was a loose graded 12-inch Luke Skywalker AFA 90. So not something you see very often, a loose graded 12-inch, and especially in that kind of shape. That was a very mint example. $610 took that home, which that's usually about the going price for a loose, complete, kind of unused contents version with the box and the window. You know, usually about $500-600, I would say. Not mint and seal box. Mint and seal box, that's going to set you back quite a bit more. But I thought for a loose graded AFA 90, I thought that was actually a pretty good deal. And $610 again, took that one home. Same seller also had an archival case, AFA 85 Luke Hoth. And as one of my Patreons pointed out to me, it's surprising he got the 85. If you look on his crotch area as well as on the binoculars, it's got pretty obvious scratches there. So pretty fast and loose with that 85 grade. That's to me looks like more like an 80 or even maybe an 80 plus, but somehow it did get the 85, and that one did sell for $202.50. I would argue that those discerning buyers who were bidding on this realized that, hey, this is not really an 85. This is probably more like an 80 plus at best, and that's probably why it went so cheap, despite the archival case and the 85 label. Buy the figure, not the grade. That's something we always talk about. I've got two different Dangars that sold. One of them is an 85 plus Hong Kong, and then I'm going to show you the Spanish PBP that was actually graded by AFA, which you don't find very often. But this 85 plus is another figure, because of all the weird angles and sharp edges to his armor, that really gets paint rubbed very easily. Very tough to get an 85 plus for Dangar. And the price reflected that, $377.55 plus $30 shipping if you were buying that here in the US. So about $400 or so for an 85 plus. But beautiful example of the Hong Kong Dangar. And then here is the 80 grade Dangar archival case. This is the Spanish PBP. And, you know, I don't know why they label it like this, Kenner Star Wars. It really should be Kenner/PBP. Dark armor, pale face. It says no COO, but it's really the Scar COO. So maybe it's before they started differentiating, you know, the figures with the Spanish PBP up top on the label. But this one was a beauty, and it sold for $100, which I thought was a good deal. You're not going to find many 85 grade Spanish PBP Dangars. They just don't exist. I think I've seen one UKG 85 in like the last year. I've never seen an AFA 85. I'm sure they exist out there somewhere, but as you can see around his gloves especially, the the plastic really starts to discolor, and it kind of turns like a weird stain around the bottom of the gloves, and you can see that very prominently on this one. Also, the white of the legs also kind of turns kind of a stain color. So it's just one of those figures in one of those factories, the Spanish PBP factory, where the paint does not stay on well. It discolors really easily. The sonic welds are terrible. There's so many things going against the Spanish PBP figures that it makes it very tough to get high grade. So $100 I think is a very fair price for an AFA example. I bet there's not many of them on the census that were graded by AFA. Another Spanish figure, this was the dark brown bandolier Spanish puck for the Tuscan Raider, graded UKG 70%. I had this in my what to buy video. And as I alluded to in my what to buy video, there's only 6 of these on the AFA census. So whether it's graded by UKG or AFA or CAS, if you can get yourself a Spanish puck sand, people, that's a good figure to get, because there's just not many of them that are floating around. And even in a 70 grade, that price isn't terrible at 250 pounds, which is $318. I paid, I think, $450 or $475, maybe even $500 after taxes for my AFA 80. So I think for a 70 grade, that's not really a bad deal at all, just given how hard it is to find that particular character from the Spanish POC factory. Next up, another POC. This one is the Haw Rebel Soldier POC, UKG 80%. That one sold in an auction for 138 pounds, which is $175. That's a price I've been willing to pay all day long. I didn't want to bet against one of my Patreon supporters. He's the one that found it, so I stayed away from it. But I assume he got it. I don't know if he did or not. But, you know, again, here's a good example of the Spanish POC factory. You can see on his vest there that it's got a stress mark. And again, all of these Spanish figures, they always have these weird kind of things. You can see where the paint's starting to come off on his leg there. You know, just very noticeable factory defects that, you know, the figures just don't hold up very well relative to Hong Kong's or China's or even Palatoy figures, things like that. So, you know, a UKG 80%, maybe it's a little generous, you could argue, but I think that you need to grade the Spanish figures a little faster and looser than like a Hong Kong figure. That's just my personal opinion on it. And UKG does that. I would argue that even AFA does that. So $175 is a pretty good price to pay for a Spanish POC earlier Spanish figure. The Spanish PBP has the pale face and the very dark brown vest, and that one goes a little bit more expensive, or a lot more expensive than the Spanish POC figure. Here was a baggie, CAS 85 Plus for Boba Fett. This one was the ESB-H, and this one sat on the market for a little bit. I was so tempted to get it because it was a Taiwan COO. You don't really see many Taiwan COO Boba Fett's in a baggie, and I just thought that was a really nice one. It was expensive, though, in all fairness. It was $620, so not exactly cheap, but it is a CAS 85 Plus. Very, very nice example. The Power Droid, this was going back to Lax or LAX's Cards Vintage. This seller, I've never bought from this seller, but he had an 85 Power Droid, big number, $270 US for a standard Hong Kong AFA 85. 21B Medical Droid, this one had the flat paint, again, archival case. That one sold for $202.60, which is about right. That's, you know, I would argue even maybe a little bit low. I would probably be willing to pay $225 to $250 all day long. I still need the flat paint one, so I'm going to look out for that one. Maybe I can grab that one in an auction sometime later this year. He had 2 different Lukes, and I think he accidentally used the exact same photos. But one of them was the Blue Saber Snap Cape Hong Kong AFA 80. So I think the photos on this one were correct. That one sold for $260, and you can see very clearly it's an AFA 80 Blue Saber. And then this one was labeled an 85 Plus Taiwan, but he accidentally used the wrong photos. That one sold for $305. I assume that they're going to get the correct figure, but this one was the correct one for the previous auction, which was the Hong Kong Blue Saber Snap Cape. I would argue, actually, the Blue Saber Snap Cape Hong Kong, that was an AFA 80 for $260 was a pretty good deal. 85 Plus Taiwan, you know, 305 is about right, too. I'm not saying that was a bad deal either, but you're taking a little bit of a risk that it's also the same grading style and archival case and things like that. But maybe the buyer of that one reached out to the seller to make sure it was correct. C-3PO, Another big price for an AFA 90. We covered maybe an auction, or excuse me, a video or two ago. There was an auction where an AFA 90 C-3PO and an AFA 90 Dark Blue Dome R2-D2 sold in an auction for big money. It was like $2,600. Well, this was just a C-3PO archival case. Again, an AFA 90 new case style. That one sold for $587. So that just shows you how much someone was willing to pay for that AFA 90 Dark Blue Dome R2-D2. That was, again, paired with another AFA 90 C-3PO that went, I don't remember the exact number. I want to say it was around $2,600. So big number on that one. Death Star Droid AFA 85, $177.50. I wish I had waited to buy mine because I thought that was a pretty good deal. In all fairness, this one did have some color rub on the eye that you can see very clearly there. So that probably held the price down a little bit. And, you know, you got to be careful buying Death Star droids loose graded. They can grade you all over the map. And, you know, the black paint especially is where you need to look out for it on the shoulders as well as on the eyes, because I've seen 80 pluses that have perfect black paint. And then I've seen AFA 85s like this one that have very obvious chipping. So just be careful when you're buying a Death Star droid loose graded. EV99, this was an 85 plus, very, very high grade archival case, new case style, $520 on that one. Big number. But again, it was an 85 plus, so I can understand the appeal on that one. Here was an AFA 85, a Monomon, again with an archival case, and that one sold for $395. Not a bad deal at all. Probably a price I'd be willing to pay for an Monomon. That's one I'm tempted on. I don't know where I'm going to put it. It's just such a big case, but I've got to find a place for one because I don't have one in my collection, and it's just so weird that I've kind of been putting it off, but I think I'm probably going to get one at some point soon. And then here was an older case-style Imperial Gunner graded AFA 85. That one sold for a pretty decent price, $435, which I think this is a good candidate to send back into AFA to get recased with a new case style at that price point. That was a very attractive price point, and it probably holds the 85 grade. It all depends on the emblems and then on the silver paint, but the silver paint on the buckle looks really good, and I think that would probably still grade an 85 all day long. All right, I think we're getting close here. Let me see. We got one more. All right, now here we go. We're starting with the Polish bootlegs. Now, I would argue this one was incorrectly labeled. And this is an item that AFA does not grade anymore, okay? So it was an AFA 85, and let's pull up the label on it so you can see it. It was labeled 1994 Polish Star Wars unpainted pre-production in black, AFA 85. Now, to my knowledge, all of the unarticulated Polish bootlegs, now I take it back. I take it back. It might be correctly graded. Okay, I'll take it back because it looks like this one is. It's the articulated example. When I was looking at this one, for some reason, I thought this was not. I thought this one was the static unarticulated. But this one is correctly labeled because it's labeled a 1994, which is correct for the third generation. So most likely, it's not pre-production. Most likely, it's overstock, okay? So maybe it's not labeled correctly after all. I don't know, but you know, you don't know, right? It's all these Polish bootleg manufacturers as they were going out of business. A lot of them had overstock that were just never assembled. I've got one in my collection right behind you up here. That one is a Boba Fett where the legs and the arms are still attached to the factory sprue. My guess, this is not pre-production, but it is unpainted, but it's not pre-production. It's probably overstock. That's my guess. But, you know, who knows? You never know, right? It could be a pre-production, but it's from 1994. It's right as the Polish bootlegs were going out of style and as the factories were kind of no longer really in heavy production. So either way, it was still a really nice item. And with like a couple of minutes left, it was like $180. I threw up a bid of $250, but it did sell for $323. And I think it's probably still a fair price, just given that you're not going to find anything AFA graded for Polish bootlegs anymore. They don't accept them for loose grading anymore. I wish they did, but they don't. If you like graded bootlegs, which the bootleg community does not, but if you like graded bootlegs, just send them to CAS. I just got a Polish bootleg, third generation, 1994, like around where this one was manufactured. I sent it to CAS, and CAS does a great job encasing them. But not often you see an unpainted third gen prune face that's AFA graded. You just don't see it very often. So again, that one sold for $323, very fair. I threw up a bid of $250, but I knew it wouldn't win it. I just wanted to see. Next up, I got some other ungraded beauties. I think this one is a second generation from about 1991. That's my guess on it, because it sat on the market for a little while. This one was over in Australia, and it's got the silver hair for Princess Leia. I've got the third generation, which is a little more, you know, it's got black hair. It's a little more common, but this one is a little bit less of a common color combination. It's not as rare as the first gens. Those are very rare, but anytime you see that silver hair, I tend to think it's probably a second gen. That's my guess. Aaron M., who is a Patreon supporter, if he watches this video, I'm sure he'll comment and correct me. He's a Polish bootleg expert. He's got one of the best collections. Or Jay S., who's another watcher of my channel and a friend of mine. He's got a pretty incredible collection as well. The two of their collections combined are probably worth more than my entire collection room. I mean, they've got some absolute stunners. So they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this one is a second generation Princess Leia. And that one sold for 600 Australian dollars, which is about 400 US. I was tempted on it because I've got some third gens that have a different color scheme, but I was kind of exhausted. At the time this one sold, I was kind of exhausted on buying anything. Here are some deluxe bootlegs that were really nice. So the same seller as the Leia had a Polish deluxe Yoda. Now, this one did not have any of the accessories. Just the accessories alone are very, very tough to come by. There's a cane, a snake, and a, utility belt. There's no cape that came with these Polish deluxe Yodas. I've got one of these CAS graded 90, but mine is like this. It does not have any of the accessories. So this one sold for 465 Australian dollars, which is about 306 US dollars. Really good deal there. That's about 50 bucks less than what I paid for mine. So I thought that was a very fair deal there. But now we're digging into the big boy items, okay? So the Polish Deluxe Reese and Gamorrean Guard are the most rare. They're very tough to find. This one was complete with the correct Polish Deluxe weapon. So what a stunner. And it was listed with a starting bid in Poland for 2,500 US dollars. That one did sell on one bid. And then the same seller had the Gamorrean Guard Polish Deluxe, which they come in a bunch of different colors, as do the Reese. The Gamorrean Guard comes with a Polish Deluxe axe, and this one did not have the axe, just the figure sold for $2,500. So that shows you those Polish Deluxe Gamorrean Guard and Reese are very, very desirable, very, very pricey. You're starting to approach Uze Turkish bootleg prices with some of those, but they are beauties. And they both sold for $2,500 on one bid each. Thank you as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at some kind of rare bootlegs as well as loose graded vintage Kenner Star Wars items. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.